Well, hello everybody. Our project for the day is our 2022 Thor Chateau. Our dinette came with one of these little contact chargers for your cell phone. It also has this little silicone cap that comes up, and it has a regular USB and a USB-C charger plug in it as well. Well, it died on us in the first few months, and Camping World removed. We bought from Camping World, and that's a whole nother video unto itself. But when we took it back, it was among many warranty items. They took it out and left it out, and we went the whole rest of the camping season with a nice hole in our table. And they finally sent us the replacement part once they got it in. And it's a 12-volt charger, simple 2-wire, setup there. So I'm going to install that today. And in preparation for that install, let's get you underneath the table so you can see. Oh, I'm going to pull that cup holder out of the way. So you can see the wires that are just hanging there. And actually, let me give you some light so you can see. So simple crimp connectors that are there, but Camping World was nice enough to just rip the top wire out and just snip the bottom wire and leave it sitting there with not a whole lot of exposed wire coming out of the little wire loom heat protector thing here. But just to show you too, since we're doing a full thing here, you can see the wire loom is, it runs through the frame here. Because, of course, this dinette top collapses down to make a bed out of this dinette. And this is the, you see the hydraulic arm there. You just push it down. So it has to be routed that way to make sure the wires don't get pinched. So when I put the new charger in here and get the wires through, they will have to, I'm going to have to change hands here, come through and go down through their little gap here and then reconnect here so that they don't get pinched. This is going to take a little extra work because I'm going to have to go ahead and snip off those old crimp connectors, cut back the wire loom a little bit. It doesn't have a whole lot of room, but I'm thinking the wires will be long enough. Let's try it out, right? So we'll stick the charger in the table quickly, change hands. I'm not going to route it through at the moment, but we'll see kind of where we're at lengthwise. I don't think we're going to make it. I may need to actually add a little bit of wire to this to get it there, but we'll see. So first things first, got to get those wire connectors off and get those wires ready to be recrimped, and we'll start that first. So as always, though, quick reminder, make sure that you are, whenever you're doing anything electrical, make sure you get the power off to the coach in all the appropriate ways. Now, if you really want to be sure, you could pull out your multimeter and check those wires under there to make sure there's no power, but I have already done that. So we're good. So the tools I expect to use for today are some wire cutters. Let's see. My nice wire strippers. And I have a ratcheting crimping tool, which will help me with the crimp connectors. Of course, we need our assortment of crimp connectors, heat shrink, whatnot, to get that done. And probably the only other supplies for today will be a few little medium-sized zip ties to help clean everything up under there. So I'm going to actually, oh wow, it is really routed through there. At least if I can get it through the top one first. There we go. It'll give me a little more room to play here. So Here's a nice end of the electrical tape, so I don't have to cut it. I can just remove it. Okay. Wire loom always has a little slit in it there, so I can just pull the wires out for a little bit. Let's clip these old connectors off, and we'll do it as close as we can to the old crimp so that we save as much wire length as possible. Here we go. So now we've got that. We'll take our strippers here. I've got you sitting on the dinette cushions. Every time I lean on my elbow to reach down here, it moves a little bit, so I apologize for that, but let's straighten that up a little bit. So I don't need to go all the way over, right? So I could actually turn this little stop and adjust it in further, but no need. I'll just eyeball and a little bit more. There we go. That'll do it. Okay. Notice how it caught all the little wire shroud. I can't think of the right word all of a sudden. Pieces there, so I didn't leave anything on the floor that I'll have to bend over and clean up, because who wants to bend over any more than they have to? So notice this is just regular, low voltage stranded wire here. Probably 14 or 16 gauge by the thickness, right? So just give a little twist to the ends just to make sure when we put the crimps on, it'll be fine. So we're gonna have to cut back the wire loom just a little bit. We can actually use our wire cutters to accomplish that. Oh, well, now I dropped something. I'll have to bend over and pick that up. I was trying to avoid it. Anyway, so that should give us enough now. And it's all right that the wires aren't at the same length. It's not really a big deal. But I really don't, you can see I'm tugging. There's not a lot of play there. So I really do feel like I'm probably going to have to add a little, 3-inch section of wire to really get those connected effectively. So now I've got my trusty box. Oh, well, I just kind of screwed myself up there, didn't I? Of wire connectors. And the interesting thing for this is going to be that we have two very different gauges of wire, right? These are very small, probably like 18, not even, they're smaller than that, probably like 20 gauge or something, versus the wires under the table, which are, 14 or 16. So I'm going to have to find like an in-between, or the larger size connector, crimp connector, right? This is for 14 or 16 gauge wire to use, and then use them with these smaller wires. So what I'm going to end up doing probably is stripping these a little further back, kind of folding the wire over, spinning it real good, just to make it a little bit thicker so that hopefully, I mean, it's not like it's under stress or anything. The table does move up and down, right? So it can pull on them a little bit. But they're not under high stress, so hopefully they won't pull out, But if they do, pull out of the connector, even though they're crimped, then, it's not a difficult repair, and hopefully won't short out the 12-volt system. But I did try, excuse me, one of these smaller gauge crimp connectors. These are for, 22, I think. Yeah, 22 to 16. So they're in between, right? On the other end of this. But it's too small. I could not get the other wire into it, so we won't do that. And I have these nice solder crimp connector things, but I'm not going to be using those today. We'll just go with a simple crimp connection. That's what was on there. These from, is it Tincon? I think is the proper pronunciation. These are shrink, so I can hit these with some heat later and shrink them around just so they'll hold on a little better. And I am debating putting, both wires through a little piece of heat shrink or something, or an individual piece of heat shrink, just to help hold the wires to the connector a little bit. But I don't know. We'll decide what to do there in a minute. But so that was problem number 25, right? Just figure out, how am I going to get these two different gauge wires crimped together well enough that they'll stay together. So I'm going to end up having to go with the larger gauge crimp connector and just try to get these back down. All right. So that's that for now. So what we'll do is we'll strip these back. So we're going to have to pull these apart a little bit further, give us a little more room to work. And like I said, I'm going to strip these much longer than I normally would, just so I have room to fold the wire back some, right? So there's one. Here's the next. Well, isn't that fun? It doesn't want to pull off too easily, so clipped. There we go. There we go. All right, so we will fold these back and then try to twist them a little bit here, just to make them a little bit thicker. Didn't quite get that one perfectly in half, but hey, who's perfect? As much as I like to think I am constantly reminded that I am not. So, all right. So that's that. Let's see, excuse me, how well you can get those there. So, not too bad. All right, so let me try to back you up a little bit here. Let me make sure you can still see. Yep. So the crimp connectors, you can see here on the back side, they have, these little color-coded dots to let you know which spot to use for which gauge crimp. So obviously I'm going to use the blue middle one. So I just need to pop that here on the opposite side so you wouldn't get to see that. Of course, it started pulling out of the connector. It's maybe a little bit longer than I needed because it's hitting, but that'll work. So we'll put it in the second one. I'll go on this side and get it ready because now pulled out again. Slid out, I guess I should say. All right, so we got it back in there. We just crimp it down. It's in there. Pretty good. So, all right. Let's get the next connector in there when we need it. One little click on the ratcheting crimper here. This is by Wirefly, upside down, if you didn't see it. Off of Amazon. Great little thing. Works perfectly. So now I've got the wire pushed all the way in where I need it. And now we can go ahead and crimp it. Pull that out. All right, looking pretty good. So now these have the connectors on it, make our lives a little bit easier. We're going to need those again in a minute. These are small enough, they should slide right through behind all those bolts and everything that we looked at when we were underneath to see how they're going to go. So we will just kind of feed that down. This, let me turn you around so you can see this way. So we'll just feed the wires down. This just has these little plastic, on the molded plastic. And that's the part number of that, by the way, if you wanted to see. Hopefully it's focused there. This just sits in here. It's just, you know, those little bumps are enough, supposedly, on the connector end, right? It doesn't really matter which way it faces, but to be honest, to have it this way is probably most effective just because it'll make it easier to pull that up than maybe doing it some weird angle or something, you know. And of course, if you're mildly OCD like I am, having it off at some weird angle would just mess with you, right? So let's move underneath and try to route those through and see kind of where that leaves us on our wire length. Okay, so let me adjust the camera for you so you can see. All right, and again, I apologize. Every time I lean on the dinette cushion, it's gonna move just a little bit. Hopefully the GoPro, and this is the Hero 11, will deal with that shakiness, right? So look at that. We are not gonna make it. So I'm gonna have to pause our video here for a minute, and I will go in the house and grab some wire for us to be able to just make a small, you know, probably just 3-inch, just to give us a little extra play, because we don't want too much. So maybe once these are there and that's there, maybe 2 inches. But I'll just grab the wire and come out, and we'll do a little extension on these. And because you don't want too much extra play, right? Because you don't want it folding out when this thing is collapsing and whatnot. So we'll just have to get it back where we want it. And what I'm going to do while I'm thinking of it is get these routed back through the way they're supposed to be before I forget, and do something like I often do on a project like this: get ahead of myself, reconnect everything, and then forget that it wasn't there, and then decide whether or not I'm going to clip off the wires or take this bolt off and readjust everything. And of course, this is a hydraulic arm, so taking that bolt off would really not be fun trying to put it back on, I am sure. So let's take a pause, and we will come back with more wire. All right, we're back. I went in the house, got my box of different colored 18 gauge wire. It's by Tao Fang, I guess is how we would pronounce that. It's 18 gauge, 6 different colors. This wasn't very expensive. Bought this on Amazon too. Really hard to find locally where I am. This kind of gauge of wire. You go to the big box stores, it's all lamp wire and stuff like that. And this is the silicone sheathed wire, so it's really, like you can see, it's very flexible. And supposedly, if I remember correctly, it's supposed to hold up the heat even better. So definitely different from the PVC coated wire, like the wires underneath the table. It's very flexible. This, by the way, this little box, it's a big orange store, as my friends over at Paving New Paths would say. Special, Husky brand. But a great little 6-compartment plastic by Husky little storage. The little dividers are removable if you need a long one, but I bought some of the big ones to move stuff from an old sort of pull drawer that I could put into my large tool chest. And then I bought some of these small ones because these are going to be great to take on the road in the RV. So you can see I have another one here with some Wago connectors, some wire nuts, little LED replacement bulbs for the bulbs in here, and all of these cable connectors and whatnot, L-shaped and 90 degrees, I should say, and stuff like that. Just stuff I take on the road with me just in case I need it, right? So those are great little boxes. They're not very expensive. I forget, they were like, I don't know, 15 bucks or something. Not horrible. But they're waterproof. I'm not going to be driving through a river anytime soon, but they hold very tightly, and they're pretty rugged. So far so good on those. So I'm gonna reach past the camera here and pull the charger back out, because it's just easier to work up here. And so, like I said, I'm gonna need to give myself what did I say, 2 inches, right? And that's in regular inches, not man measuring. So down there was a gray and white. It's a little headband light. I'm not showing it to you on my head because I am not camera ready today. It's Saturday, and so I didn't jump up, take a shower first thing, and comb my hair and whatnot. So you don't get to see me today. But this little thing, I'm not going to point at the camera, another Amazon special, and I'll link all this stuff down in the description so you can easily find it, whatever. But, I mean, look how bright that is, right? 2 different brightness levels, and then it has the flashlight on the side. One of the cool things it has is this other little button that's here. It's hard to see, but if you press that, it has a little motion sensor on it. So you can just keep wearing it. It won't keep burning the battery, but when you need, you just put your hand past it, turn it on, put your hand back past it, turn it off. And it works really well. So, and it's super flexible, even the front part. So, man, very helpful. It's a great little thing. And it's light. And it's USB rechargeable. We have white and gray down there, but we have red and black here, so we'll just use red and black. So what I'm going to do is just, by the way, this little box is very convenient. The rolls just sit in there next to each other, right? All the different colors. But the box is a nice little dispenser, right? So easy enough. So we'll get our, it's closer to 3 inches. But once it goes into the connectors and everything, it ought to be right about what I need. So, lovely. Move that out of the way. Get to use my handy dandy vice grip wire strippers again. This is 18 gauge wire. You can see, compare there. It is a little bit thicker. So this is probably like 22 gauge wire on this charger. So this I shouldn't need to like fold over and everything. I should be able to just put it in, so I don't need to strip it that far. But we'll go ahead and do both sides while we're at it. I'm gonna go that far, there we go. See how easy that was with these instead of old-fashioned strippers, you know. And this does have, you know, crimpers there, which you could use, but, and actually some little wire cutters there. So it's a one-stop tool if you just want to carry one with you, right? But I got my whole tool bag there, so why not use my other purpose-built tools? And, you know, spent money on them. Ooh, now a little shorter than I want. Might as well use them, right? There we go. It's easy enough. I cut it a little short and just stick it back in. And pull off a little more. So we will twist those. Nice, all right? Twist. It's nice when it's a loose wire like that and you can actually spin the wire from the long end instead of from the unsheathed wire end. All right, so now we will crimp her back again, right? Put it in the blue side. That's the nice part about having a ratcheting set like this. So now it's one-handed, I can hold that, right? And it's holding it in place. We're doing black first again. I have like middle-aged man short-term memory, right? So I had 2 seconds later, I still got to check that, right? All right, crimp it. Nice and tight. That's not going anywhere. Okay. Get it in there, set where we want it, right? Just crimp it, ratchet it enough so it's holding it. It's still, you can see, loose in there, so it didn't start crimping the little metal connector in there, which would obviously make it more difficult to get our wire in there and seat it properly. And so now we are going to crimp it down. Man, wish I had gloves on. It is cold out here. All right, so that's done. So I will come back with, you know, a heat gun and melt these down since these are shrink connectors, just because we can and we should, right? So now we're there. We get that little bit of extra wire that we needed, right? So while I was inside, I went ahead and hit the connectors with the heat gun, right? So you can see how much, that's 2 of them together in that heat shrink, so you can see how much they shrank. And I'll insert a photo of what they look like after they've been shrunk. And then just because, you know, I'm a little OCD, I went ahead and threw some heat shrink just over it, just to kind of hold it all together, especially since it's going to be routed through past all those bolts and everything, just to, I don't know, make it a little more solid, okay? So you can see how that looks after throwing a little heat shrink on there. Again, you know, it didn't, you know, the big heat shrink that I had to use, big enough to fit both of these after they were themselves already shrunk, had to be big enough to fit those 2, is too big to completely shrink around the ends of the wire, right? What I will tell you though, however, because I'm new to the silicone sheathed wire that we were discussing earlier, when I was putting that over the heat gun, this stuff did not get melty or tacky or whatever, where the PVC stuff always sort of on the end closest to where the heat shrink is, where you're applying heat to shrink those, they got tacky a little bit, like they get a little melty, so you have to be careful of that when you're heating things. These did not. They held up to that heat much better, right? So the idea that they will hold up to the heat better is actually a thing. Okay, so I'm gonna flip you around now, right? Let's make sure you can see. This is the hole for the cup holder that I moved out of the way, so let's not, oops, confuse that. Here's the hole for this, so we will stick those wires through. And again, I'm gonna let my moderate OCD kick in a little bit. I can turn it from underneath a little. There we go. And again, it's only moderate OCD, so it doesn't have to be perfect, but there it is. So let me turn this little flashlight I have on the top of my GoPro for my media mod on. And let's angle up a little. Get back under the table so we can see what we're doing down here, right? So let's get a little more light. There we go. So between that and my trusty handy dandy lighted headband, you guys ought to be able to see just fine. So we have our other 2 wire connectors here. I'm going to go ahead and preload one of those into our crimper. We'll just set that up here on my de facto workbench for the day, which is the dinette. And let's go ahead and fish these back through. Now, hopefully, having the connectors and everything on isn't gonna, having heat shrunk them and everything isn't gonna make it overly difficult to fish those back through. No, just fine. Okay. So now you can see with that little bit of extra wire we added, all right, let's twist that back. We're definitely going to be able to have the length we need and not too much extra length, so it should sit pretty well. I'm feeling good about it, right? So what I should have done to save myself a little trouble is crimp these ends of wire connectors on up on the table instead of trying to reach underneath to do it. And by the way, having that other cup holder out has made a nice little entry area for my hand. So let's go ahead and get him out. I'm gonna have to retwist these wires a little bit, nice and tight, so they will slide right into the crimp connector. Hopefully that will go in nicely and I won't have to. There we go. Alright, so get my other hand under there so I can, oh, pinched myself. That's always fun. Okay, pop that out. Pinched my hand pretty good. That hurts. So, alright, so let's get this one twisted up really nicely. Get ready to put that crimp connector on. We're going to try really hard not to pinch myself again. Okay, that's in there, it's seated nicely. Now I'm like crimp paranoid, because I don't want to pinch my hand again. Alright, that one's in there. That'll work. You can see that red spot where I pinched myself really good right there. Alright, so now my only question is, which wire is which, right? We're going to test this, however, before, and we will need our multimeter to do that. And we'll need to turn on the power. So let's pause while I get my multimeter out. Okay, so I've gotten out my multimeter, and what I've done is I have the alligator clips. So I clipped one end to one wire and one end to the other. And now we will come up here and I've put them in red in the positive, black in the negative, right side of my multimeter. And my multimeter is on volts DC. So what I'm going to do is show you just very quickly for those who don't have a lot of experience with multimeters, and I am by no means an electrician. But this is my Klein CL800. Oops, too far. So we put it on volts, but it comes on, see the little sine wave that's there? That means it's on volts AC, so I have to hit select. Until now it shows DC. Now, what are we seeing? 13.12 volts, but we're seeing a negative, which means I have my clips right now reversed. I have reverse polarity. I have them backwards, right? So that means they're plugged in properly here, right? Red to red, black to black. But down here, the wires are backwards, okay? So if I come up here, I'm going to go ahead and turn this off, and I'm going to get the camera little legs out on my handy dandy mini tripod here, all right? And so what we'll do is we'll go ahead, we don't need to move the clips down there. We can see red to red, black to black. We'll just flip-flop these now in the multimeter. Turn our multimeter back on. Again, it defaults to AC, right? 120, so we need to move it to DC. So now the negative is missing. That's the proper polarity, okay? So what that tells us is our wires where the alligator clips are underneath are reversed. So now we'll know that the black alligator clip is actually on the positive, not the negative. So we'll know that our red and black wires actually have to be hooked up backwards to the way our clips are right now, right? Or I could flip the clips, flip the script, right? Flip the alligator clips so that they're on the proper. You know what? Let's go ahead and do that right now. Okay, so as sometimes happens when you're working and distracted videoing and whatnot, it didn't video me connecting the other ends. So the other ends are now connected. I did make the mistake of forgetting to turn the 12-volt wiring, or the 12-volt system back off before trying to connect the wires. Had to turn that back on to test the wires with the multimeter. There needs to be power coming through the wires to be able to test the wires for the polarity like we did. And I forgot to turn it back off. I didn't get shocked or anything, but obviously you don't want to short anything out or break anything. So I realized that I missed that and went and turned it off. And then when I came back, even though I thought I had turned it on, the GoPro, it was not recording. So what you missed was no big deal, just me crimping the other ends in. I put the wires back in the wire loom. I'll pull it out for you. Threw a little zip tie on the end instead of using, let me straighten that up for you, electrical tape. And then just to keep the wires inside here, since nothing folds into it at this part, right? A couple of zip ties here just to hold the wires back up inside there, just so they'll flop out, right? There's no legs or anything going through there because of the way this is designed, right? So nothing should have gone under there while sitting at the dinette and grabbed them and pulled them or anything, but just for a clean install and to make sure nothing grabs them if somebody reaches a hand down there to scratch their knee or something, and a couple of zip ties just to keep the wires from flopping out. So we now have 12 volt power to the coach again, and so now we can test whether or not our wireless charger is working. So here's my photo with the picture of my beautiful puppies. I love them so much. Let's throw it on there. There you go. Charging signal. So that's working, right? And what we'll also use, I'll dig into my electrical bag of tricks here. And I have this little USB charge tester, right? Just like you would have an outlet tester, right? Like, what's in the same pocket there? Let me pull it out. Yeah, I like Klein stuff. This is a outlet tester, but it also has a GFCI tester, right? So you can plug this into an outlet. So we don't have a 120 volt power right now. So if I plug this in, I get nothing. But you can use this, right? If you have this plugged into a GFCI outlet, if you press the test button, it'll send a little electrical pulse, for lack of a better term. Like I said, I'm not an electrician, so proper terminology is escaping me at the moment. But it'll send a little electrical jolt, if you will, to the GFCI, and it should trip the GFCI outlet, right? So that's how you test to make sure that your ground fault circuit interrupters are actually working properly. So this is the USB version of this. They make a version of this that has the regular, USB 2.0, 3.0, connector, and a second cable that comes out with a USB-C. But I don't have to test things enough to make it worth the extra money for that. So I just bought this one. Let's plug this in. All right, comes on. Should read around 5 volts. There it is, 5.12. That's fine. So it is working properly. It is not, we got the polarity correct, right? Okay. I may end up throwing a little piece of like double-sided tape or something on the underside edge of that just so it doesn't move around and pop out. But here's something I'm going to bring you along on an experiment. I have these little USB to USB-C adapter that I use, on my computer, because my new computer only has USB-C. So I'm curious if the tester will work with that. And I got to kind of hold it in there because it's a little too wide to get in there on its own. But yep, it's showing the voltage. So if you want to just buy this cheaper one, and then if you've got one of these little USB to USB-C adapters, it'll work for you. My only problem was the little round edge there is the adapter's a little too wide, so I just kind of had to hold it. But there you go, it works. Hopefully whatever angle I'm getting that at, you can read it. Okay, let's see, right there, right? So, perfect. Job complete, successful, all done. All right. So, hey, that's one job down for today. So, I know, I went way into depth on all the different steps, and for some of you, you don't need to understand how the multimeter worked or hear discussion about wire or crimp connectors, etc. But for some people, they need all of that stuff. So I always go with better more information than less, and let you fast forward through what you don't care about, right? So hopefully this helps somebody out, right? On how to test things a little bit, how to do a little wiring and some stripping and whatnot. And hopefully it gives you the confidence to know that this little tissue, I actually found it behind there, to give you the confidence that you can make these small repairs on your own. You don't need to take this into the your RV shop and wait 6 months to get it done, or call a mobile tech or something for something this simple. Okay, and it's the 12 volt system's much easier to deal with, obviously, than the 110. Okay, So I'll, like I said, anything that I used here, I'll go ahead and link in the video description below. I'm not an Amazon affiliate or any of that stuff, so I don't make any money off of it. I don't do enough of this stuff to go through all of that. But I'll put it there so if you are working on a project and this is helpful and you need to at least find what the specs of the things that I use, and then you can buy whatever you want that matches that. Hopefully that would be helpful to you. So I'll go ahead and add those in. My next project is going to be, I bought a sound bar. This is the Insignia TV that came with the RV. It's a 40-inch TV, I think. It's a good TV. It's just, it's not a smart TV, so we put, you know, a Fire Stick in it, which works wonderfully. But the sound on it is really just not great. I got a little sound bar, and I actually got just a little mount that'll mount to the TV's mount. That'll put a couple of little legs right there to mount the sound bar. It might require me to move our tissue paper holder. This is a Camco product, if I'm not mistaken. But that's just up there with command strips, so we can pull those down and redo it. Same with this. This just has command strips on the backside, and it's just holding this in place. Because the only outlets right around the dinette is there's one outlet down underneath the dinette near the CO2 or LP detector. So there's an extra outlet behind the TV. So just went ahead and plugged that in there. And it has a nice on-off switch, so we can switch it off when we don't want it to have a parasitic draw on the system at all, right? Which doesn't really matter so much for us because we don't have an inverter and all those other things, but I might someday, right? So when you're buying a little one, why not get the one that has the on-off switch so you could do that, right? Anyway, that's it. So that's it for today's project. Wireless charger successfully reinstalled. Looks pretty clean under there. I've already cleaned up after myself and picked everything up, so final test will be moving the dinette, but you don't need to be here for that, just to make sure that everything still sits in there like it's supposed to. Oh, look what else I just found under there. A pen. All kinds of things are falling back here. Might have to find get one of those little stove guard things, you know, that sits back here that'll kind of close that gap, keep things from falling back there. All right. Thanks, everybody. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to comment below, and I will do my best to answer them. Like I said, I'm not an expert, but just smart enough to be dangerous. All right, take care, everybody.